You're listening to Creativity Unconfined. Stay tuned to learn about how the arts unlock the doors for those who are imprisoned.
Greetings. I remain, as ever, Dave Gussack, the director for the Florida State University Institute for the Arts and Art Therapy with the Imprisoned. And yet again, we have a remarkable episode of Creativity Unconfined. Today, we're going to be bringing the wonderful talent and experiences of Matt Reffick. Matt is an artist and arts facilitator whose work explores the role of creative practice within correctional environments. Through the years of facilitating arts workshops and drawing programs in prisons, including work connected to the Administrative Maximum Facility, the ADX, otherwise known as the Supermax in Florence, Colorado, he developed approaches centered on drawing, journaling, observation, and visual storytelling as tools for reflection and self expression. His facilitation practice emphasizes accessible, process based art making that encourages creativity, focused, and personal exploration, often working with individuals impacted by incarceration and the justice system. I can't tell you how very excited I am to have Matt here with us. So let's bring him to the stage now. Matt, oh, it's such a pleasure to see you. I think it's been, I think, what, 6 years since last I saw you out there
Yeah,
in
it's been
Colorado?
yeah 5 or 6 years since last I seen you.
My goodness. So I got to tell you, I just a simple question because there's so much here. You've been a productive artist for so long. Your work is incredible. But tell us, how did you get here? How did you get from there to here, working at some with the most, as far as I can tell, as far as I know, the most notorious correctional facility here in the United States?
Well, I mean, some of it was just circumstance, and some of it was just my ability to or my willingness to do so. Right. So I'd been living in Australia actually, and then I moved back to visit. My mom lives in Pueblo, which is right outside of Florence,
Hmm.
and it's about 20 minutes away from Florence. And I was just visiting my mom. I started painting a bunch of murals in the city where she lives in Pueblo, and that kind of got me stuck in Pueblo. And so I was
You stuck in Pueblo.
yeah.
Okay.
Well, because I mean, my intention was to move back to Los Angeles, where I'd been living for the last 15 years. And so I had started working on these murals, and then I just became really interested in this idea of the overlap between being an artist and mental health, because like you spend so much time in isolation as an artist that you just start to have this relationship with your own your own psychology really becomes present as an artist. And so I'd written this book called Meet Your Monsters, and it's a coloring book, self-assessment book that I just kind of came up with. It was just a bunch of drawings of monsters that I had done, and I published that. And it's like, it's like a picture of a monster, and then like, what's your biggest fear? And then you kind of like, it's a journaling practice and then a coloring book. And I posted that, and my partner in the program, Justin, who you're good friends with, he saw it, and he was like, I'm starting this program, and I think that like what you're working towards is really interesting, and it might be really helpful within the program. So then he got a copy of the book and presented it to some of the psychology staff there, and then they kind of gave me feedback of like anything I should change. Like really, just there was a couple just triggering questions. They're like, just remove those because one might be triggering, one might be incriminating. So I just I all.
Do you have any examples of what some of those questions might be? I'm finding this intriguing.
Okay, so like a lot of them are just kind of basic, where it's like, what's your biggest fear, or what's a time that you felt anxiety? But then I had asked a couple, like, have you ever lashed out in violence? Right.
Oh, okay.
And that was one where they're like, remove that one. And then, like, have you ever thought about self-harm or something like that? So it's like kind of these more like dangerous questions, whereas, it could be triggering, or which it was really helpful. Right. Because I was like, when I started to actually meet the psychology staff, actually, because I had direct conversations then before I'd even gone into the prison, I'd already started to have conversations with the psychology staff. And so they presented the book to the prison. I did a workshop. And kind of I juried an art show that the very first one, actually, it was in the prison, and they had me come in, and I was, I just kind of went over the artwork that Justin had been working on in that first season, that first year.
Before we go on to where this took off, I would like to point out we were lucky enough to find a copy of the book Meet Your Monsters, and we put this image on. This isn't necessarily what I had imagined to the cover. Can you describe this cover for the person who's driving across I-10 going through New Mexico towards California? Tell us what we're looking at here.
Well, I mean, so like I came out of like this graffiti art background. Like that's really where
Okay.
I had grown up doing graffiti, and like that was a big part of my life, all the way up until I became a professional muralist, basically as an extension of my graffiti art practice. So
Yeah.
I'd had all these books, and a lot of my graffiti art was these monsters with these little characters and these little creatures, and so I just had a lot. I just have dozens and dozens of books filled with these drawings, and so the Meet Your Monsters book is really just an extension of those, where I was pulling just these monsters out of these books, and it's like this own self-reflection of like, why do I have these? Why do I want to as a kid did I get interested in vandalism, and then why do I have these kind of like tendencies towards anxiety or just kind of lashing out or whatever? And it was just like this idea of like, why am I painting all these monsters, and then just these overlaps of my street art practice. So at this point, it wasn't even, prison had nothing to do with it at this point. It was just my own, relationship with myself. So I made this book that, I just called it Meet Your Monsters, because I was like, what are my monsters? It was really just an art project, just kind of a self-reflection project.
But it sounds like your own background, the way you were just describing it. You had some experience with vandalism. You had some experience with graffiti. Was that in Los Angeles? Was that where you?
Well, yeah, kind of everywhere. Like I grew up in Colorado, and then I moved to Boston, and then I went to Los Angeles, and then Australia. And I mean, all along that path, I was involved in graffiti art, like for sure. And then, like I had been charged with a felony actually when I was 17 for painting train cars, which was the first time I went into a prison because I had to go to Scared Straight. So that was the first, my first introduction to it, which was an interesting introduction because I was in there for art, and then I realized in that moment that I'm just like, well, like, because I wasn't being Scared Straight at all. I was literally, for the 2 days you're in Scared Straight, I literally sat at a table with them and drew pictures. Like, I was like, this is great. I don't mind this at all. This is actually quite okay.
I mean, that's a remarkable transition. So you were put into the Scared Straight program. You're sitting down with them, and you just started drawing. Were the other guys that were at the table drawing as well, or was it just you doing that, or were they seeing what you were drawing?
Yeah, well, it's like, the culture of drawing in prison is like, so they're like, you're good. Like, so they were like, oh, you're in here for art. Like, are you good at it? And I was like, I'm pretty good.
You're in here for art. Oh my goodness. That's great. So you were almost arrested. You were basically arrested for art.
Yeah, I got arrested for painting train cars, like murals on train cars, right? It's like, I was never just a blatant vandal. I've always been an artist. But I got caught painting train cars. And so like they kind of just threw the book at me. And so I had to pay a huge fine. I was on supervised probation for a time. And then I had to go to Scared Straight. And so that was like really my first introduction to prison. And then me understanding like the value of art in prison, actually. So it was kind of this full circle thing, because I remember I bumped into the judge. Well, actually, I had this other program where I was working with probationers in the court, and I was taking probationers out to paint murals in the courthouse, actually. And I bumped into the judge that sentenced me, like 20 years later. And I was like, it's funny because you sent me to Scared Straight, and it ended up taking this whole different life path. And I've been now the lead art facilitator inside of the Supermax prison for the last, 8 years now. And it is kind of interesting because you really like open my eyes to like the value of art within the justice system.
Oh my goodness. And so we just pulled up this one image of these two gentlemen who are if I remember correctly, this is the uniforms that they wear in the Supermax.
Yep, those are two ADX inmates. That was the first time they've ever, like I was, they've always kind of given me like free reign in the ADX somehow. Like I've been in all the units, I've been like through the whole facility pretty much. And like, so the warden at the time approved me to paint directly with inmates. So this is the first time actually ever that they've just allowed inmates to work directly with a volunteer, because I was just volunteering at that time. And so this is actually a pretty special picture, because this is like the one and only time that that's really ever happened, that they've just let inmates out to just openly work. Because usually at the ADX, at the Supermax, they're either in safety enclosures, like they're in the little cages that they go into, or they're shackled and handcuffed. And so this was the first time that they were like, they're like in a step down unit, like, and they're on good behavior. So they just allowed them to paint with me. So I was like in the room with them, which was a pretty interesting To me, like this picture means the most because I was like, what? That was a huge step because it was the first time they've ever allowed that to happen, where just a non-staff member was with, pretty much even with staff, they're always they're either shackled or within safety enclosures. So unless they're in one of the step down units, they're usually not having direct contact with human beings.
Wow. So for those of you driving on Route 66, what we see is a photo of two elderly gentlemen, these two men who are incarcerated in the Supermax, wearing the khaki uniforms, and they're painting this enormous wall that's intricately designed with details of a dragon going towards the right, a pocket watch in the background. One of the gentlemen is painting a skull superimposed over the watch. And there seems to be a grotesque looking figure that the person on the left is blocking, but it's really an amazing, detailed ornamental image. I mean, just to give everybody a context, describe for us what the Supermax is like, the ADX is like, and how to give people really a sense of clarity on how very difficult it is to get in here and do this kind of work.
It's one of the most highly secured environments on Earth. So, you know, just actually the physical practice of getting into the facility. I mean, you go through like, you know, numerous checkpoints before you're even into the prison. And then it's like, you know, it's everything isn't from, you know, control centers. So you can't, you know, they're looking through cameras to open door after door after door. You know, just to even get into the prison, you have to go through like 7 doors, like 7 solid steel doors just to get into the prison. Yeah. And then when you go into the prison, it's just hallways filled with more steel doors, right? So just like
there's nobody in those hallways, if I recall. It was these enormous white glaring light hallways with maybe one person moving with 4 escorts.
Well, yeah, and it's so there's the communication. So like if they're moving a person, like you rarely see an inmate unless you go into the units or you're holding a class. Like they either bring the inmates to you or maybe you'll see one in the hall. Like they're being escorted. There's always 2 people with them at least, and if they're a very high danger risk type inmate, then there's 3 people with them. And so you'll always see, you know, maybe one staff member or one inmate and 3 staff members is the most you'll ever see in a hallway. So if you're there and you happen to see an inmate, it'll just be one inmate that you'll bump into because they're, say, escorting them to medical or something.
Now, the Supermax, of course, is filled with some of the most notorious people in the United States. And again, being there and meeting them and then being told afterwards, look, you can't talk about them. Nobody is supposed to know that they're in here. But some of them are considered outside to be quite dangerous. How did you feel when you first went in there and started interacting with them and realizing that you were painting alongside them? And I've got a little anecdote afterwards to tell you that because I've experienced this myself. What was it like for you to work alongside them? How did you feel? What was your own internal response?
Well, you know, it's like conceptually it seems scary, right? Where it's like, okay, like I'm going to deal with people that are, you know, chances are they've committed murder or chances are they've committed acts of violence, right? Like that's a direct pathway to the ADX is like, you know, you assaulted, you committed murder inside a prison or you assaulted staff. Like that's the majority of the people that are in the ADX, that's what they're in there for is, you know, like being volatile inside of a prison system. Like the famous inmates that we hear about, like those are the minority, right? Like the, you know, the terrorists and people that get sentenced directly to the ADX, like those are the few and far between. The majority of people in there are just inmates, gang members usually that have just, they have lashed out in violence. So that's mostly who I've worked with, right? So as I went in, you know, like I start to meet people that at the time I don't even know how notorious they are because I'm not always familiar with who they are. Now, as I've gone through all the years, like I'm like, okay, like that person is really dangerous. But they don't seem that way, right? They are just like you and I. Right. Okay. Like as you get to know them, like they're very smart. They're super intelligent, actually. Some of them have incredibly high IQs. Like they're very smart. And some of them are, you know, they're just kind of wild, you know, they're just like, they're just people like to party, you know, or like people like in extreme sports or whatever. But they're just like you and I. They have just normal conversations. They don't like, if you just met them on the street, you wouldn't think that they have a tendency towards like, they'll cross the threshold and hurt somebody, which, you know, then I just started realizing like the similarities between criminals and artists. I'm like, I have a lot in common with these people. Like, honestly, like they're my friends, honestly.
Yeah. Tell me about those similarities. Cause I think that's something that a lot of people outside don't recognize. That's something I've certainly come to understand and accept. Tell me about what that overlap looks like.
Well, I think it's like this idea of like free thinking, kind of like they like deep critical thinking, and then also like anti-authoritarianism, right? Like I think those are like the overlaps between artists and criminals, where it's like they're super similar, where it's like, yeah, don't tell me what to do type people, you know? Like I express myself how I express myself. And that's really interesting because I realized that it's kind of the same. It's just there's a fork in the road at a certain point, and people can choose to like put their energy into creativity or destruction. And but then, you know, like as I've gotten to know more and more people, I'm just like, you know, they're very similar to any of us. They're not,
Right.
you know, outwardly, you know, lashing out, and they're not violent. They're 99.99% of the time they are not violent. They're gang members for the most part. The people I've met, they're gang members, and then in prison gangs, in the system that's set up, they're forced into violence. Like, I mean, the majority of the people that I've met, like they're in prison originally for like drug dealing or robbery. They're not in there for murder. And then when they go to prison, then they're forced into a system that be like, now you're going to have to be part of a prison gang. And in these prison systems, like you're going to have to commit murder, because that's like what's happening in the system. Like the prison system is set up to essentially kind of perpetuate those. Now, I'm not saying that it's intentional, but it's like, there are definitely ways that I've seen that you could, you know, like reduce that, but that's not their priority, you know, like in my opinion. Because I just am like, you know, like that person didn't have to do all that. Like you put him in the supermax. The judge put him in the supermax. They made that monster, you know. And that's been something I've experienced a lot, where it's like that person was just troubled, and then the justice system turned them into a monster.
That's an incredible synopsis. It recalls the time when I've worked inside many different institutions, and I remember the first time that we were doing a mural in one of our adult men's facilities near here. And we were doing it on an outside wall, and we had about 14 or 15 incarcerated men on this wall, and it was a large wall, so we had 3 levels of scaffolding. So we're 35 feet up in the air, and I remember the first time that I climbed the scaffolding, and I'm working alongside 2 or 3 men at the top of this mural, 35 feet up in the air, and it never dawned on me until afterwards that I'm up there with people who have I don't know what their crimes are, but there is a lot of trust engaged because A, they knew that I was there to work with them and see them as the people that you're describing, and B, there's a trust in the art process. There's a trust and a generating whatever or sublimating any of those impulses into and through the art process. So when I see the work that you're doing and I'm hearing what you're describing, it resonates beautifully with our experiences. That's amazing. We've been lucky. You've shared with us some images of some of the people that you've enjoyed working with, that you have worked with. Let's bring up one of my favorite pieces, and I'll explain why it's my favorite piece once we get a look at it. This piece here, I'm honored to say that I actually own this piece. This is actually hanging up on my wall right now over my desk. Can you give us a synopsis of the who this person is as much as you can, and your work with him, and how this evolved, how this relationship evolved?
Sorry. One second. Sorry.
That's just Justin. He's wanting to know what we're doing.
Okay, so he was actually, so this is, we'll call him Oz, right? Like I could probably say his name now because he's not even at the ADX anymore. He is one of the people, like, so in my 9 years at the ADX, I advocated like openly for 2 people, and both of them actually have been taken out of the ADX now. Okay. So they've both stepped into different prison systems. They're actually in state systems now. So it's pretty cool because in state systems, they have their tablets, so I can actually keep in contact with them. They can call me anytime they want or send me messages on GTL. So Oz, he was, you know, he's a gang member, right? He's in there. You know, as I get to know him more, it's like, man, he got such a bum deal, right? Just through like the justice system and RICO cases, and you know the way that jackets follow people, just by you make a deal as a kid. He was 16 when he got his case, and he turned 18 in the feds. So, and then it was like one thing after another led him to the Supermax. Like, honestly, he had kind of no choice. You know, he got put into a caseload of people that he did not deserve to be in the caseload with. Not to say he's not affiliated with them, but he got put in a caseload where they're going to send those people to the Supermax. It's a super famous case. It's like one of the most famous Supermax cases, actually. But it was a big RICO case, and they sent just a cluster of people to the ADX, and they all had the death penalty also. They're all up for the death penalty, and he was one of them. He was a kid. He was 2 weeks to the street, and a riot broke out. He ended up having to kill somebody in a prison riot. Just a fight, fight broke out. Dude died, and they just threw the book at him again. He'd been he grew up on the streets, and long story short, when he was 24, he got sent to the ADX. Just a kid, and he was just clumped in with this other group. And on his jacket, he reads that he's affiliated with these more volatile groups, and he is affiliated with them, but they don't he's too young. Like, there's no way he was doing all that he was saying he was doing. So anyways, I met him. He had already been at the ADX for about 12 years when I met him, and he's the same age as me. He's 44 now, and so he went into the Supermax when he was 24. And 2 years ago, I was advocating, actually, because he's not volatile at all. He's not he's I would be comfortable in a room with him. Like, he's not that type of person. He's super chill, really. And he's an amazing artist. And so I went to the warden. I was like, look, this guy has a clean record. He hasn't had a shot in 8 years. And the only time he got a shot he wasn't really deserving that shot. Like, he didn't attack a staff member.
And for my cousin Millie in Oklahoma, what do you mean by shot?
Like he didn't get a punishment. Like, he didn't get basically a charge. They didn't feel like the need to reprimand him for something, but they did, because they had kind of messed with him, and he didn't do anything to harm anybody. He just kind of freaked out one time because they told him he was going to release. They told him he was going to step down, and then they came back the next day and were like, yeah, we're not going to step you down, actually. And so he got mad, and he broke something in his cell, and then they're like, we're going to give you a shot for breaking that thing, which is something that they do. And I was like, I would do the same thing if somebody told me I was getting out of
you should see my office. It's filled with broken things for that very reason.
Well, it's because I'm always imagine the ADX, it's like the size of your bathroom, right? It's like the cells are tiny. It's 11 feet by 7 feet, but everything's in there. Your shower's in there, your bed's in there, your desk's in there, all your clothes are in there. Your whole life is in this 11 by 7 box, right? So I'm like, imagine if you were locked in the bathroom for 10 years and somebody's like, I'm going to let you out. And then they're like, never mind. I'd probably be mad too, right? So
yeah.
But that was his only shot. So I went to the warden. I was like, look, I realize that his jacket reads this particular way, but that's nonsense. That there's no way that they're going to let a 17-year-old kid participate in that. He's way too young, and he took the rap for him. And that's what happened, because they don't let 17-year-old kids into those organizations that he's taking the rap for. And so everybody knows that, but his jacket does read it, because that's his sentence, right?
And for cousin Millie, jacket, of course, does refer to his file and everything that follows him, all the paperwork that follows him.
Yeah, and it follows him indefinitely, And I've been working with him still, and I was like, how do you get your jacket changed? Because that's your jacket reads you're straight out. They watched, I always joke with them. I was like, they watched American Me, and they just think that's you, They think that because they watched a movie that you're that person because it says so on your jacket, but really, anybody that knows anything about gang life and gang politics knows that that's impossible, that you could actually be participating in that. Because you got sent in as a kid and then you went to the ADX. There's no way you've been doing all that. But so I advocated for him to actually just get out, step him down so he could paint a mural with me and be unshackled. Because if they're in step down units.
Had he ever done artwork before this? I mean, this is just so I can describe this, because I don't think I could describe this. So I hope that those who are right now driving on Old 66 will eventually go to the video to see this piece, because it's remarkable. It's of a large bluish tinged ogre with a too tight clothing, so his belly showing, his monstrous arms, carrying an hourglass, an enormous hourglass on his right shoulder. He's standing in profile, walking away. He's got a cane, and clearly it symbolizes the notion of being a monster and time going through. Has he ever created art before coming in, or how did this evolve? especially since one of the things that we're really focusing on is this notion of how art allows us to change labels, that he's no longer prisoner, he's no longer gang member, he is an incarcerated person who now makes art.
Uh, well, you know, like that was he grew up doing graffiti art, so like I already knew him. Like, I mean, he's a gang member. He joined a gang when he was 11 years old, which he had no choice about. But he was an artist naturally, kind of. But he was a vandal. He was into like doing gang art. Like he was like a tag banger. Like so he would go out in Los Angeles, is where I grew up, and he would, you know, vandalize things. It was part of who he was. And then he really discovered his talent for drawing in prison, but especially at the ADX. He met somebody that you may not. His name is Trig, and Trig's an amazing pastel artist.
Yeah.
And he kind of started teaching people in the ADX. He was in the same unit as Trig, and Trig was like teaching people, you know, this is how you draw, and he taught Oz how to, you know, do his work, and he really thrived at it. And so, like, you know, it's interesting because I met Oz, and he was still his gang name. Like, you know, everybody has their handles. And so when I met him, he was going by this name that I was like, okay. And he was a little punk, you know, like not really, he was just a gangster. Like he's a full on LA gangster, you know? But then over the course of like the first few weeks of working with him, I'm like, oh, like I have a lot in common with him. Like when I lived in LA, I lived like just blocks away from where he grew up. And like, you know, I knew a lot of people from his neighborhood, and I was like, oh, wow, like we have a lot in common. So like we became pretty close friends, you know? And but simultaneously in that same group were people that are in rival gangs from him, but they're amazing artists. And that was something that was like probably one of the most profound things I learned at the ADX is like this identity building that we give people through creative expression. Like I always think like these gang members, they take oaths to be gangsters, right? Like that's part of their life. Like they have no choice. Like that's their family. That's their, you know, they have choices, but it's a hard choice to be like, I'm going to survive in Lompoc, right? Or one of these crazy violent prisons without a gang. Like good luck. Yeah. Like any of us would join a gang. Like that's what's going to happen. Like you have no choice. And so, but they join rival gangs, and then that's their identity, right? They join a Mexican gang or a white supremacist gang or whatever it is, and it's just in a black gang, whatever it is. They have no choice. You have to join a gang. Any of us would do that. The chances of you being a lone wolf is pretty rare. But then when I meet them at the ADX, and they're members of prison gangs, and that's their identity. I know them as prison gang members when I first meet them, but then through the course of the project and the program, like we start to be like, well, let's develop an artist identity, right? Like, who are you as an artist? Like, we're here for this. Like, we can leave all the gang politics at the door right now, because like we're here creating art, and the program is really unique because we give them a lot of gifts. Like, it's super valuable to be in the class, and you know, to describe the class is it's a semicircle, like you've seen them. It's a semicircle of safety enclosures. Like they're in cages. They're caged people. They come in shackled. My supplies are in the cage, you know, in the safety enclosure, but it's a cage. And then, you know, it's a 4 foot by 4 foot by 7 foot cage. And my stuff's in there's a little metal desk in there that they can draw on. When they come into class, my stuff's in there. The escorts bring them in, they unshackle them, you know, they unshackle their hands, and then they can work with me. And then there's this semicircle of cages. And it's interesting because I get people from all walks of life and all different gangs, like opposing gangs. And as where most federal prison yards are separated, they like certain prison yards can have certain gangs and other prison yards can have other gangs, so that it doesn't create riots. But
right.
The ADX houses everybody. You know, they got anybody from any gang. So like you start programming with people that you know that if they unlock the cages, those two people would have no choice but to try to kill each other. Like they would go right at each other. They would immediately try to kill each other. And that's just gang politics. They don't hate each other.
Nothing personal, right?
It's nothing personal. It's literally just gang politics. And for me to see one thing that's really bad to me is like this idea of like they're mortal enemies. They've taken oaths to be enemies, but they can create these identities through being artists that they become really, really close friends. Where like, and I've seen that especially with like the individual Oz that we're talking about, and another member of a gang, like of a white gang, and they would if they unlocked him because of just the way that things have unfolded, they would have no choice but to try to kill each other. But like I know them as like really close friends, and they don't like they're allowed to too. Like even the leaders of the gangs are like, that's cool. Like you guys are just being artists, and you can have that relationship as artists, and you're friends as artists, and you can be having conversations as artists. But remember that you took these oaths as gang members, and you have no choice but to uphold those oaths. But we let it slide because what you're doing is even super interesting to us. So we like to see it happen. Plus, they're on good behavior, and we're giving them gifts, right? Like I've gotten them cleared to like have like watercolor paints. I've gotten them cleared to have like just a lot of different supplies that normally they wouldn't have had. But just because I just kept asking them. It's like like these are safe. They're all plastic. There's no metal in them. And let me give them these really nice watercolor sets. They're all plastic pens or all plastic brushes, but they're really nice brushes, and they can do really interesting work. So and in a prison like that, like those kind of gifts are really valuable. You know what I mean? Like that.
Well, it's a hierarchy inside. They value the artist. They value someone who can create. It's a tradable commodity. It's something that they can take advantage of, and it's one of the few and rare ways that they can actually beautify their own spaces.
Well, it's it's funny because it's like the first time I ever went into the ADX, I went into a unit, and I'd seen this, people that are notorious, right? Like notorious, like gang leaders. And, they're like violent, right? Where it's like, they got black handprints and swastika, like just crazy looking people, And then I'm just like, they're super into knitting, or crocheting. And so like you go into their cells, and it's like, this person is just notoriously violent. And then they're like super into knitting sweaters, their whole cell is filled with just knitwear. And it's like,
That's great. Oh my goodness. I don't want to let this slide, because I think this is an important component of what you and Justin have created. I'm hoping that the observant listener recognized that I said I have that piece on my wall. So it's rather unusual for pieces to be pulled out of the institutions. It's even rarer when they're actually allowed to be purchased, which is what I did. So tell me about the evolution of that project, where you're allowing, or you've set it up so that those pieces are finding viewers and consumers and patrons, in essence, outside of the facility.
Well, I mean, that was like, it's like all of it's just policy, right? So it's like, okay, like somewhere within all these policies, there's a way to make things happen, right? There's
Good, giving us hope. I like it.
Yeah. I mean, there's like, I don't know if you like some of these policies, like I always joke, I'm like, I mean, the policies are like stacks of paper like this.
Right.
Like, good luck. Like, like I operate in this tiny little fraction of a psychology policy, like on one page, and it's a 800-page document, and the only thing I'm operating under is this one clause within one page of these policies, And it was the same thing with the sales. We'd found a way that they're able to sell things within the federal system. And so that, like the ADX being part of the federal system, they follow the same regulations as any federal prison does. So there was a clause where it's like, well, you can, like, if you're selling hobbycraft, you can, right? Hobbycraft is generally inside of camps and mediums, right? But it's federal policy, so you're allowed to do it. So if your institution has a hobbycraft program, you're allowed to sell them. And we found through the recreation department. And you can sell it, and you get 50% of the inmate gets 50%, and 50% goes to a nonprofit. That's just how the policy reads.
So the incarcerated person does receive a percentage of what so it goes in their commissary. They're allowed to have that.
Yeah, so it goes on their books, and they can have depending. Well, see, all of this changed now. Like all of this changed in the last year, so it all kind of a bunch of circumstances made the feds just be like that. That does not work. They're violating policy. Like there was this twofold thing. Like we weren't violating policy, but people were using that policy and violating it. And then again, because the feds it's a sweeping kind of process through all facilities. They're like, yeah, nope, that ain't happening no more. Not on that level. Just because of like it was like with the death row inmates, they were kind of, because you're not allowed to profit off of your crime.
Right.
And so that there was other individuals not within our program, but and at a different institution that were. And so then when there was just a bunch of just kind of unfortunate events that happened that made the program at Florence, at the ADX, kind of like get media attention in a negative way. And it was at the same time as this other thing was happening. So then it just like got swept across the board. They're like, yeah, that ain't happening no more. You can't do it. Within those levels of security, the lower levels can still do it. So like campers and medium security, even at USPs, they can still sell their stuff. And technically at the ADX you can too, but they just were like, you have to be way more careful about this because there's no oversight. And
do you still show this work in that local gallery?
No, they've canceled all of that pretty much.
Oh my goodness, because that was I have to say that was an awe-inspiring experience to go into that gallery where that show was being held and to see just a range of abilities and skills and techniques, but most importantly, to see their identities out there and being accepted by people who were just coming in off the streets to look at it. Every year since then, up until last year, Justin Reddick, who we'll get a chance to speak with him later on, hopefully, but he would take me on these little video tours of all of the shows every year to show me what was on display. It was amazing. So they've changed that now. They're no longer able to display the gallery.
Yeah, I mean, it's just kind of like, it's just like thin ice, right? It's like, it's not like these hard no's. It's just like, like is it more trouble than it's worth? Because like last year, the way that it ended up having to be because of these other situations is it just really created a lot of dilemmas. And it's like one of those things where it just created more work than it was kind of like worth, because it's like if it's just me and Justin doing it, it flows really good. But like when something like that happens, like the whole bureau gets involved, so it's like, and they're like, it's just too much. Like those things can't land on their desk, like they have other issues dealing with the Bureau of Prisons, and they don't need to deal with an art program because there's other, a lot bigger issues that they are dealing with.
I want to hold on to that and revisit that later, because there's a particular question in that. But you said that there were two people that you worked with and advocated for inside. Do we have the artwork of the second person here?
Yep. So I sent you one. So the first one is Oz, and the other one, his name is Dennison, and he's actually in a low security prison in California. Yep, that's
a piece right here. Okay. Wow. Okay, yeah. So what we're looking at is an older gentleman, really old, with a long white flowing beard, sitting in a chair, writing with a quill pen in a book, holding on to a skull in his left hand, and he's lounging in the seat. He's wearing this flowing green outfit. He's got all of these books behind him. It's such an intricately detailed painting or drawing of almost a Shakespearean character. It's the details is just astounding. Tell me about this person and about his work.
He was like one of the people that made it through the whole federal system without joining a gang.
Really?
Yeah, and he went through the whole system. He was in prison for 32 years in the feds, and wow. He's an escape artist, so that's why he ended up at the ADX, because he had too many escape attempts, and he again not a gang member, non-violent. He's an escape artist, and they're like, well, if you try to escape one more time, we're going to put you at the ADX, and he did, and he had a life sentence. He had 3 life sentences actually, and so I was like, a lot of people were advocating for him. His psychologist, Reddick, everybody was definitely like pushing for him to be released, or at least step down, because he's like, he's a good guy. And everybody knew that. Like him, what you're looking at is a relatively big canvas. Like we were able to clear for him because he's not volatile, and he's a good dude. Honestly, like he's not violent. He doesn't even have a history of violence. And so we advocated for him to, as part of the art show, be like, can we give him canvases and paintbrushes, right? Doesn't hurt to ask. And the warden at the time was like, you know what? Like, he's a good guy, man. Like if anybody's going to be capable of doing this, it's him. So we were able to give him full sets of paintbrushes, full sets of acrylic paint, and canvases with wooden frames in them, which all of those things are banned in the ADX. But the warden gave a memo that he could do it. And he ended up painting like 20 relatively large paintings. Like some of them are like 24 by 36. Like they're pretty big size paintings. Like this is like 24 by 36. It's a big painting. And same with this one. It's a big painting. It's like 24 by 36. And it's not the highest quality of stuff because, we're on a budget and we're having to buy it. So
that's
it's like
the highest quality.
It's not the highest quality materials. Like he's using.
Oh, okay. It's amazing to describe this for somebody driving along I-10. We have these two very muscular, hunters, very similar to the Conan the Barbarian type figures, and they're going up a snowy embankment, fighting with a tiger who is growling at them and fighting with them. Very similar to the Boris type paintings we grew up with, as you know, the record label art that we would see on heavy metal paintings. But this is just an amazing composition. So he didn't come across as violent to you. He started out fairly level, but did you see any change in him throughout the process of working with him through the art? Did he open up more to you? Did he just connect more with you through the art?
Well, like he was a person that already had a really committed art practice. Like that was his prison hustle. Right? Like he had already been drawing forever, and on the street, he was also an artist. Like he was just he had been an artist his whole life. Like when I met him, he was probably 60 years old. Like he probably just turned 60. And so he had already had a long form art practice. And, it was interesting because he wasn't interested in the program. He already had an art practice. He didn't need art lessons. He's a really good artist just in general. And then he was one of the people I got to paint the mural with. He was one of the people that they allowed. And then as I got to know him more, I just started seeing like he's really intelligent. He's written several books. Like he's just a really, really fascinating person. Amazing storyteller, just somebody that I was like, wow, he's just like, of anybody that's in this place, like he's an interesting person for sure. He's an anomaly in there, honestly. Because, it's like I always say that there's like these categories of people where it's like, there's like gang leader type people that are, just dangerous as leaders. And then there's people that are, crash test dummies, we call them, where it's like they're violent, like they're going to go cause harm. Like, if there's a prison riot, like watch out for that one. They're going to go attack people. And then there's people that are, maybe just not, wired wrong, right? Where they're just, they think of the world in different places, and like serial killer type people, or that's the minority in there, right? Like mostly it's gang leaders and gang members. That's the majority of what the ADX is. Of the 400 beds that they have in there, 400 plus beds, like the vast majority are gang members. And then there's the small amount of terrorists, and there's a small amount of just volatile kind of
multiple murderers. Yeah,
like people committed multiple murders, or there's people like the Unabomber, people like that, right? They were just kind of like anomalies. They're not really, they're just violent. They get sentenced to the ADX, and it's like, honestly, those kind of people don't really need to be in that level of security because they're not volatile that way. But the judge sentenced them that way, and they kind of make a case in point of them where it's like, you do something that crazy, you're getting locked in the bathroom forever.
Wow.
But with him, he was like his own anomaly, where it was like he wasn't a gang member, and he's a very sound mind, and he's in there for escape attempts. Like that's honestly why he made it to the ADX, and he's that's the rarest type of person in there, right? Where it's like they're just happen to end up at the ADX, and so everybody kind of knew that, but after like 9 escape attempts, they're gonna have to do something with you. So he ended up there, but as I got to know him more, I was like, well, this person definitely doesn't. They're old. They're done with their escape attempts. They're aging out of bank robbery. That's for sure.
Is he in a state facility?
He's in a minimum security prison in California, where his case is. So, because what had happened, like he has a beautiful story, and it's like a story of kind of hope, like where. So we were advocating for him, and just kind of like, he painted all these masterpieces in his cell, and it was just like this whole thing. It's the only time ever, and probably the only time that ever will happen in that facility. But they let him do it, and he got a bunch of attention. They let him. He was the warden at that time let him publish his name in the newspaper, and there was a whole article written about him in the Denver Westward. And then they let a news journalist in there. To the first time ever, they let a journalist go in and interview. That was the first journalist they ever let into the ADX, and like they interviewed him. And one thing led to another, and the warden advocated for him and was like, you know what, like we're gonna step him down. We're gonna he has a life sentence at the ADX, but we're gonna get him out.
How long have you been doing this now there?
Well, I started at the ADX in 2016.
Okay. And you started as a volunteer. Now I understand that there's some grants. There's you're able to get some support there.
I was I was a volunteer for 7 years, and then they contracted me to just do the work. Where like, okay, now you're just a facilitator in this. You're in the education department as the art teacher.
to harken back to something you said about 15 minutes ago, 20 minutes ago, that essentially it's you and Justin here. As our final thought, our final little piece to kind of pick apart, you two have been doing a great deal of work in establishing this. I've been connecting with Justin since he reached out to me, I think back in 2012 or 13, and I started consulting with him then. It's a lot of years, and it's just essentially you two. How do you see this play out so that it does expand? I mean, as energetic and as young as you and Justin are, you guys are amazing. You're not going to be around forever. The prisons will be, I hate to say. How do you see this being ensconced into the system so that this can be handed off or it can be expanded or continued to work on? In a couple of minutes, how would you see that developing?
Like they stopped the ADX program. Like they're not like I left as a contractor, and then but I have like 9 years of experience of like, like for 9 years, they gave me like freedom of like going through that whole facility. And I started working with Justin, and he works in religious services, right? He's a chaplain. So it started off in the chaplaincy, and then I picked up another class with the recreation department. And then when I was contracted, I was contracted under education, but then they weren't really taking it on. So then the psychology department took it on. So a large basis of my work is in the psychology department, separate from Justin, where he was kind of running his own classes. And then when I got contracted, they're like, well, you have to do these 20 hours a week in here. So the psychology department was like, this is awesome. Like, this is amazing.
It's where we belong.
Yeah, we'll take it. Yeah, like the psychology department, like, because they want it. And I really, like, one of the main programs I worked on in there was in Stages, which is, it's a program for people it's a borderline personality disorder unit. And like, I loved it. Most people hate Stages because it's like, dealing with 40 people with borderline personality disorders is like a lot sometimes.
That sounds like a family reunion to me. Oh, I'm sorry. Sorry.
Yeah, because if one person starts setting it off, they're like, man, you might start a chain reaction.
So you have been to one of mine. Okay, good.
Yeah, and then it's like, and then I'm just like, I'm facilitating a class. I'm like, this is amazing. Like, everybody's screaming.
Yeah.
There's OC in the air. Like, my eyes are, I'm crying.
Oh my goodness. This has just been an amazing conversation, Matt. I look forward to having you guys back on the show again, having you join Justin again. I'll watch you guys talk with each other and build off each other because you will be back. This is amazing. I thank you for your time today, Matt. I've learned a great deal.
It's always a pleasure to connect with you, Dave.